Have you ever just woken up and wondered if your best days are somehow already behind you? Or maybe you feel like you're working harder than ever, but you're just falling further behind? So let's dive right into this explainer on the absolutely profound power of our internal narratives. Today, we're going to explore why some people get totally trapped in those endless cycles of feeling stuck, while others manage to rise above it. And we're going to anchor this all around the deeply relatable story of an ordinary guy named Michael Carter.
Because think about it, most of us spend years, literally years, searching for success out there in the world. We look for better jobs, more money, better connections, or we just wait around for that one magical, perfect moment where everything is finally going to change. We start wondering if success is just about pure luck, or maybe some extraordinary talent we just weren't born with. But what if the real transformation begins way before any of those external things even happen? What if it actually starts with 3 simple words we say to ourselves before the day even begins? Keep that question in the back of your mind, because the answer is something so small that almost all of us ignore it every single day.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's meet Michael Carter. Michael lived in Aurora, Colorado, right outside Denver. At 38 years old, his life looked absolutely nothing like he had imagined when he was younger. I mean, he wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, he didn't have some crazy unique talent. If you walked past him on the street, you probably wouldn't even notice him. He was a warehouse worker, and every single weekday for him began with an alarm clock just screaming at 5:15 in the morning. He would lie there staring up at the cracked ceiling of his tiny apartment, already feeling completely, utterly exhausted before his feet even hit the floor. He truly felt like life had already firmly, permanently decided his future.
And Michael's daily struggle was basically twofold. For almost 12 years, he worked at the exact same warehouse, loading delivery trucks, which obviously left him physically drained. The pay covered the basics, sure, but it was never quite enough to actually get ahead. But the real anchor, the thing that was really pulling him under, it was the emotional exhaustion. His body wasn't just tired from all that heavy lifting, it was tired because hope had literally become heavier than sleep. Every evening he came home physically drained, but far more importantly, he came home emotionally empty. Compounding all of that emotional exhaustion was simply what he saw around him. Honestly, the hardest part of his day wasn't the grueling warehouse work at all. It was watching everybody else move ahead. We've all been there, right? His social media feeds were just constantly filled with old classmates celebrating big promotions, buying beautiful new homes, taking these lavish family vacations, building successful businesses. And at first, Michael was a good guy about it. He would sincerely congratulate them. But eventually, scrolling through his phone completely transformed. Every single photo, every success story, it all just became a painful daily reminder that life had seemingly forgotten about him.
And because of that constant heavy comparison, Michael just stopped dreaming. Dreaming had just become way too painful. But then, one evening, after another incredibly long, draining shift, he was cleaning out his bedroom closet, and he stumbled across this old cardboard box. Inside were some notebooks from his early 20s. And right there in those pages, he found a list of life goals he had written nearly 15 years earlier. Start a business, buy a house before I'm 35, travel across America, help my parents retire. He just sat there on the floor, staring at that faded handwriting for minutes.
And then, looking at that list of totally unfulfilled dreams, Michael actually laughed. But it wasn't a happy laugh. He laughed because it just hurt so much. Not a single one of those dreams had come true. Not one. And for the first time in years, he quietly whispered this to himself, maybe I'm just not meant for anything bigger. It was just this heartbreaking moment of total, whispered defeat. He was finally realizing that he had, fundamentally, given up. And those incredibly heavy words, they stuck with him.
Because that single whispered phrase didn't just vanish into thin air. The very next morning, it became the absolute first thing he thought of right after opening his eyes. Then the next morning, and the next. Without Michael even consciously realizing it, those negative words slowly mutated into his actual identity. They shifted into these statements of absolute finality. I'm not good enough. I'm too late. Nothing ever changes. These thoughts literally became his morning mantra, setting this dark, gloomy stage before the sun was even up.
And here's the really tricky, dangerous thing about negative thoughts. They rarely shout at us. They whisper. And because they're so quiet, because they just whisper in the background of our minds, we completely stop questioning them. We start accepting them as hard facts instead of just passing, subjective opinions. These whispered thoughts silently took control of Michael's actions. He totally stopped applying for better jobs because, well, he already expected rejection. He stopped trying to learn new skills because he had convinced himself he was way too old to start over. His life wasn't being controlled by his circumstances anymore. It was being driven by the invisible story he just kept telling himself.
So this internal story created a rigid, totally unyielding reality for him.
Weeks passed and they were all exactly the same. Wake up, go to work, come home, watch television, sleep, repeat. Just sit with that rhythm for a second. It's exhausting, right? Every single day felt exactly like yesterday, just wearing a different date on the calendar. He was totally trapped in this monotonous cycle, anchored firmly in place by those whispered, defeatist morning thoughts.
But then, the entire energy of our story shifts. It all happened on a cold Tuesday morning that honestly seemed completely ordinary. Before hitting the warehouse, Michael stopped at the exact same neighborhood coffee shop he visited every single week. He was totally just going through the motions. But as he waited for his coffee, this tiny, mundane accident happened, and it became the turning point. When he went to grab his cup, he fumbled and he accidentally dropped a whole handful of coins right onto the coffee shop floor.
Now, sitting right nearby, over by the window, was an older gentleman reading a newspaper. He looked to be maybe in his 70s, the kind of guy who just smiled warmly at absolutely everyone who walked through the door, even complete strangers. Seeing Michael drop his change, this wise stranger didn't just ignore it or look away. He actually bent down, gathered up the scattered coins, handed them back to Michael, and offered him this really genuine warm smile.
But it didn't just end as a polite little exchange. The older man looked right at him, really looked at him, and said, "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, son." Now, Michael, who was caught totally off guard and deeply buried in his cycle of emotional exhaustion, just forced this awkward, polite smile. His immediate defensive response was exactly what you or I might say when we're trying to hide our pain. He just muttered, "Oh, just tired."
But the old man just nodded slowly and then gently, but very firmly replied, "No, you're not tired. You're discouraged." I mean, wow. Michael absolutely froze. How on earth could a complete stranger instantly diagnose the exact emotional emptiness he had been feeling and hiding for years? It completely cut right through his physical excuse of the heavy warehouse job and hit the absolute, undeniable emotional truth.
The old man then folded his newspaper, looked directly into Michael's eyes, and delivered this incredibly profound warning, a sentence that would literally stay with Michael for the rest of his life. Be careful what you tell yourself before the world has a chance to speak to you. Let that sink in. It's such a powerful thought. Before your boss speaks to you, before social media speaks to you, before your bank account speaks to you, you are already speaking to yourself.
He went on to explain his core philosophy. This stranger told Michael that those very first words you say to yourself every morning, they become the literal blueprint for the rest of your day. They design your entire trajectory. They dictate whether you're going to move toward hope and possibility, or if you're just going to sink deeper into doubt and stagnation. Michael's morning whispers of, "I'm not good enough," were actively constructing a daily house of failure before he even walked out his front door.
Michael was completely stunned. He thanked the man politely, grabbed his coffee, and started walking toward the door to head off to his grueling shift. But right before he stepped outside into the cold, the old man's voice stopped him dead in his tracks. He issued this life-altering challenge. Calling him toward the actual possibility of real hope, the old man said, "Tomorrow morning, try saying 3 different words instead."
Michael turned around, completely hooked now, and asked the exact question I bet we are all asking right now. What 3 words? The old man just smiled, kind of playfully, and said, "I'll tell you if you come back tomorrow." Michael had absolutely no idea that this one simple conversation was the major turning point of his entire life. And it leaves all of us with a massive, incredibly important question to reflect on. What is the internal script you are reading from every single morning? Because right now, tomorrow morning is waiting for you. What will your first 3 words be?